Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Spring is fresh. The gardens are blooming in my town. A light breeze is blowing and as in childhood, I say I am in the cottage. I feel good, warm and relaxed walking and enjoying the young greenery and fragrance. The inviting all of the gardens. Early morning, clean sidewalks with not a soul around. Only the pounding of my heels echoes around the neighborhood. I'm without a car today. My baby's at the car wash. The bus stop is empty too. She sits down on a bench. I'm waiting, but the bus is gone. It won't come and won't come. You can't do that. What's the matter? Is this bus kidding me? It won't go. It was such a nice way to start the day, not to be annoyed and angry. I start humming my favorite songs to myself. All the kids are getting impatient, dancing at the bus stop. Looking around, I meet a glance with an old grandmother. Where is she going this early? Then a man of about 40 years old appears. I see he's in a hurry to get to work. Then two lush ladies in their 50s. They're all looking at me in amazement, and I'm still singing and dancing. Stop singing. Here it is finally coming. A man addresses me and runs forward. The bus stops. I run to him and enter through the back door, take a seat by the window, put my purse on the seat next to me as the seat is occupied. If any of the oversized titans want to sit with me, I'll tell them it's taken. And I'll tell the man it's a long drive, and I don't want him to squeeze in here and sniffle or sneeze. Let them consider me harmful, but I cannot stand encroachment on personal space. And right now, the situation allows me to avoid it. Plenty of seats, half-empty transportation. Grandma, of course, if she wants to sit with me, I'll give in without complaint. I remember from school how to behave on the bus. Do not shout, do not eat, do not grunt, do not push, respect old people, do not offend children, and if necessary, to help them. But everyone passes me by, though they look at my purse. 5 stops later, more people are coming. And then a woman about 35 years old appears in front of me. She has a Scandinavian appearance, piercing, blue eyes, and platinum hair. And she drills me with a look. Then in a soft, doughy voice asks permission to sit with you. Please, I reply, and put my bag away. She pulls out her phone, and the display is instantly illuminated by a bright light. Out of the corner of my eye, I see my neighbor flipping through photos. They appear to be of her children and husband. I apologize for my curiosity. Are these your children? I ask. Yes, mine are so grown up. You don't look much older than that. 35. I'm 45. She sighs. Oh, you look younger. You must have gotten married early, huh? No, I didn't. I was 18. And now my daughter is 26 and my son is 19. How could your parents not be sorry to give you away so young? My parents were glad I was leaving them. The family was poor. It was hard to feed and clothe the kids, you know. And now I'm gone, and they're relieved and calm. Although my husband will provide for them. I'm sorry for the indiscreet question. I don't know why I'm so curious. I wonder, did you marry for love? No. It was out of desperation that he came to visit his relatives in our village. What about us? We had a hopeless life there. No prospects for grooms at all. Only proportions. Yes, pensioners. There was an old widower looking at me, 25 years older. He was persistently courting my parents, saying I wouldn't need anything. Old and ugly. Well, I wanted to marry him to make it easier on the family. And here's Stephen Young, attractive with a guitar over his shoulder and a glint in his black eyes, called me to the city, albeit in a dormitory, but a comfortable one, with hot water, a bathtub. I couldn't dream of such a thing. And I really wanted to get rid of the old man's suitors, and my parents supported me. Marry him. You'll go to the city to live. Good. So I married him. Is that really how it works? I can't believe it. At least you had a good husband. No. He was very arrogant. We lived with him for a quarter of a century. He always treated me like a lower-class person. I was supposed to serve him, cook, do his laundry, stock up on groceries, take care of the kids. He never once asked me how I was feeling, not even during periods of pregnancy or what my mood was. I felt like a thing part of the interior all the time. All in all, there was no soulfulness in our relationship, but you gotta hand it to my ex-spouse. He provided for me and the kids. Good. I really did not need anything. My husband forbade me to work and strictly forbade me not to take care of the children. We had enough money. He had a wonderful career. He quickly became the head of a department in a trading company. It was both good and bad. Good because his earnings increased significantly, and we were able to buy a nice apartment in the city center. And bad because Stephen started having affairs. I remember him having an affair with a young secretary, 10 years younger than him, always working late and often visiting the office on weekends. But she apparently got tired of that life and got married. The spouse immediately had a nervous breakdown. He drank for a week and did not go to work, was rude to me and the children. For 6 months, he went crazy. He was constantly irritated and upset with the young beauty. In his sleep, he called her name, moaned and screamed, and then woke up in a cold sweat. He lost interest in all his fishing hobbies, hunting, not going to meet his friends, discussing soccer and drinking beer. He ate very badly, sat picking at his plate for half an hour, and eventually left all the food untouched. In the soul of my steak rolled resentment of unprecedented magnitude. And I had hope. I kept thinking that he would return to his former state, realize that we are the most important thing in his life, and I, gritting my teeth, all tolerated, and then he just kicked us out. He came home from work himself. Surprisingly, he ate dinner with appetite, sat in front of the TV, and calmly said, "I can't live with you anymore. I love Camille, and I will pursue her." At that moment, the hairs on my head stood on end in disgust. She's married. I objected. So what? A husband is not a wall, but will move. What do you see in her? What I don't have? I don't know. I'm Emily. My husband rose abruptly from his chair and locked himself in the bathroom. I heard the water bubbling from the faucet, and I cried. I couldn't bear the blatant injustice. What about me and the kids? Doesn't he love them anymore? Some Camille is more important than his own blood. I couldn't understand it. It's been hard on them. Stephen explained himself to his son and daughter. He left us an apartment and some money for the first time, and Emily sighed, pointed to the pictures of the children. This is my youngest son, very kind. He's very affectionate. He gives hugs and kisses. And here's the older one, businesslike and serious. A handsome boy like you, and the eldest is a copy of her father. I've been staring at this woman with all my eyes. She's got the right features, the right eyes. Big hair, cool blonde, with an ineffable hue. Slender figure, well-dressed. With all the fibers of my soul, I felt how bad it is for her, how hard on her soul is not settled personal life. Such a beauty is unthinkable. Yes, your husband was mean. He was only thinking about his own pleasures. He said he loved his children, but he didn't love me. The beautiful eyes of my neighbor. I didn't have much passion for him either. But she was a good wife and convinced me of everything. You still grieve for him. She was silent, and after thinking for a while, answered. To answer that truthfully, no. I'm probably happier now than I was with him, right? Why? It turned out that through the proposed circumstances, that is, through divorce, I found myself in life. It happened from the fact that I was very excited by the question why my husband changed so much when he met a young secretary. There was nothing so outstanding in her. And I'd known him for years, and I couldn't say he was in love. Stephen was always pragmatic. He made the best of everything. Suddenly, there was this sadness, this longing for his secretary. And it occurred to me that he had a spell on him. I found a specialist in this case, and she confirmed my fears. She offered to turn him away from his young mistress. But I didn't need it. Then Evelyn, that was the fortune teller's name, persuaded me to become her companion. She saw in me the potential of a psychic. I'm very grateful for her help and training, and she saved me from poverty. After the divorce was very difficult. I had questions about how to live now, how to support my children. Where will I go? And now I have a trade, and I am standing firmly on my feet. It's good that there are such caring people, and people smiled at Emily. Yes, Evelyn is good. She's revealed the ins and outs of the profession. Even though she's a gypsy, but she also had her benefits. I gave her a certain percentage. Now, of course, she has her own salon. She's built up her clientele, and new people often come. How many women have passed through me with their problems? They all have their own difficulties. It's not a sugar life, but my personal life hasn't worked out. But I'm not sad. I live for my children, and I already have a granddaughter. They named her Marfa, 3 years old. She's so smart. And what do you do now? Emily asked me. I work as a jeweler in an organization that appraises and sells jewelry. And what kind of husband are you happy with? Do you love him? I thought hard. What to say loved? Loved him so much that he died. Emily was genuinely surprised. In a way, yes. The woman cast her eyes downward, and she stretched. Was it you who buried him for yourself? You might say alive. I mean, he left me for another oh-so-young, handsome woman. I laughed. Aha. I don't know why. Do you have kids? I have kids. Bah, sure. Daughter, 5 years old. That's good. That's good for you. She won't feel sorry for him. She'll blame him for leaving you for the rest of her life. That's how Emily and I became friends. We exchanged life stories and phone numbers in just 40 minutes on the road. And finally, she said, don't worry too much. You're beautiful and kind. There will still be a good man in your life, and he will be faithful in marriage. Your words to God's ears. I said goodbye to her. Then I sighed heavily and mentally returned to the time of my happy married life. My husband, Christopher, beautiful green eyes and brown hair. And I am a blue-eyed brunette with an adorable mole above my upper lip. Slim, but not skinny like a stick, but with appetizing shapes. We are a little over 30. We are happy and still in love with each other. Or rather, that's how I see our married life. Our daughter Jenna is growing up. Christopher literally carries her around in his teeth and never lets her out of his arms. Spoils her. We've been together 6 years. During this time, we had nothing but quarrels, whims, violent reconciliation, night walks with conversations until dawn, jealousy shots, vows of eternal love. The future together looks very promising and successful. Christopher is serving in the Guard and is rapidly advancing in his career. I remember how recently we celebrated his appointment as company commander in one of the best restaurants in the city. We set a sumptuous table for friends and acquaintances and danced until the wee hours of the morning. It seemed to me that we were enjoying each other's company. Christopher kept his eyes on me in love. He did nothing but invite me to slow dances, kissing my hands and hair and whispering banal things in my ear. I love you. So, we're prosperous. We have 2 apartments in the city, one renovated in the center for living, and the other 1 bedroom in a building under construction. It's for Jenna as a dowry. I bring quite a lot of money into the family. Sometimes my salary exceeds my husband's income. I have an engineering degree as well, but I did not have to work on it. A classmate called me to his salon, and for this it was necessary to finish the courses. What did I do? I don't regret it. The work is interesting and profitable. My husband and I have a varied and interesting, intimate life. And I support him in his desire always and everywhere, and he shows every pleasure on this occasion. In the summer, we necessarily, the whole family, go to the sea, always in different places, visited the resorts of the Azov, Black, Caspian Seas. We flew to Turkey and Egypt. All this was until recently. But 6 months ago, my mom got sick. I gave all my strength to take care of her frequent night duty at the bedside of the sick. Negatively affected family relations. It seemed that in general nothing had changed. We still joked and spent rare moments of rest together. But by nightfall, I had no energy for intimacy. I attributed it to fatigue, and soon we drifted apart somewhat. Finally, my mother recovered and was able to take care of herself. I thought things would go back to normal. However, Christopher's attitude towards me began to cool. He stopped taking the initiative in intimacy and always seemed tired. I'd come home late from work. I did not leave the feeling that I am in the backstage and cannot see the theater action fully. Something is slipping away from me, and irrevocably. I could have saved the relationship, done things differently, hired my mom a nurse, and she's terribly embarrassed by them. After all, if a person does not respect his mother and cannot in a difficult moment to help her, what kind of egoist is that? No, I couldn't cynically deny her. After all, I know very well that help from a native person is much more appreciated than from a hired worker, and the quality of care is different. Only I knew how my mother will be more convenient to overpower the bed or how to boil her favorite porridge. A daughter's love must be reckoned with, and we'll all come to an age where we may need outside help. Christopher always thought he was ironclad, brushing off other people's troubles as if they'd never touch him. It's like he's talking, or exceptional, but I could not even imagine that his cooling towards me is the result of love games. I thought I was tired of being ignored, of being busy, but it turns out he was quite happy. Each of us judges by himself, and, being by nature not jealous, I did not pay attention to those calls, which every day became more and more. And although our city is quite large, I didn't manage to hide it. Everything came out. But I didn't get suspicious right away, of course. I believed in his integrity like an arrogant idiot. I realize now how devious men's nature is, how easy and short-lived are their vows, how easily they can deceive, handed to them a woman. Treason is inherent in nature. Men. The life of most of them is subordinated to emotions and passions in women. They see the female first and foremost, which is why they are so easily seduced by throwing themselves into a romantic maelstrom. They forget everything about their wife, their children, their conscience, their responsibility. All on the altar of lust, there is only me and my desires. There is a psychological aspect. In this irrepressible craving for intimate adventures conquers a man one half and so asserts its power. Look how powerful and brutal I am, and do not realize that normal women, for whom the family is of value, it is not the main thing. They respect their men for caring, making responsible decisions, support in a difficult moment. Feeling with such a man as behind a stone wall wives can and sensually open up. They can afford it because they don't have to play the role of a man in the family. Hence the freedom to be their own weak, loving, and passionate girl. But I'm so wise now. And at the time, Christopher seemed like the best man in the world. And I was sure he was incapable of betrayal. That fateful day didn't start early in the morning. When I got to work, I remembered I'd left the hall light on. No big deal. But I decided to call home and ask Christopher to turn it off. It was his day off. But I couldn't do it. 7 tries. My husband's cell phone was dead. I was going to take the day off and run home. But then a wealthy client showed up. "Wendy, hello there." I nodded at her. The woman entered the salon, and from her demeanor, I could tell she had been here many times before. The rich woman confidently moved a chair to my table and sat down. It was a young lady, very expensively dressed, well-groomed, and stylish, and she looked at me absent-mindedly in a slightly condescending way. Her gaze slid to my name tag. They had recently been forced on us. In the woman's big blue eyes, for a moment, there was confusion, as if an unexpected hunch had flashed through her mind. But after a moment, her gaze became the overlord's again, and Nato touched herself with a sharp lard coating to the tip of her dainty nose, smiled slightly, and she said, "Would you mind coming over to my place and appraising one face for the view? It's an interesting gold ring with a large emerald. Its owner says it's antique from the mid-19th century. The price is exorbitant, so I need your confirmation. And most importantly, I must have no doubts about its authenticity. I'm not gonna hurt you, of course. I'm generous. I looked at this lady and could not take my eyes off her. Black, short hair arranged in a perfect style, high breasts, and an enchanting low voice that sent shivers down my spine. Wendy Smith came from a well-known family name in town. Her father owned several print publications and was rumored to have an income in the oil business. He was a very wealthy man, but not indifferent to the fate of his hometown. His pictures, sisters, headlines constantly flashed in the newspapers. Rick Smith patronizes orphans. He helped to restore local history exhibits, sponsored a charity event. Whether the man was doing it for publicity or whether he really cared for his small homeland, it was hard to understand. However, there was a lot of money in this family, so I smiled at his daughter and immediately suggested that if it was convenient for you, I could arrive at 20 o'clock. I know your address. That's why I came to you. I've gotten good feedback. I'm impressed with your discretion, your ability to know information, and your ability to save your customers time. Then I'll invite the salesman to 8 without saying goodbye, and Wendy Smith left with dignity. I looked after her, admiring the gorgeous mink, manto of rich blue color. I shook off the daze caused by the client's outfit. I called the daycare center to see how my daughter was doing, and warned the teacher that she'd be staying the night tonight. My husband and I decided to put Jenna in a 24-hour daycare center. When my mom got sick, both my husband and I worked hard. I sometimes until deep into the night, and Christopher often clocked in for the day. In the past, she used to enjoy staying with my grandmother for long periods of time. But due to her indisposition, this option has become impossible. Now Mom needs time to fully recover from a complicated operation. I tried dialing my husband's number again, to no avail. I was no longer worried about the light left on, but about Christopher. Where had he gone? I called his service. I got Slobodsky to the commander of the 1st Platoon. I recognized his voice immediately. He cheerfully informed me that Major Austin was absent today. Vanessa. Well, he wrote a report at his own expense for 3 days. The warden signed off on it. Yesterday, he told me he'd discussed it with you. Were you planning a trip to your relatives? Kazan, I think. Thank you, Sam. I hung up the phone with surprise. We had never had any relatives in Kazan. It all seemed very strange. I spent the whole day getting my paperwork in order. In the evening, I went to the elite cottage village where the Smiths lived. It was located 20 kilometers from the city. The rich man's mansion was visible from a mile away. He drowned in the dense warrens of plantings. The gate opened automatically, and I drove into the yard, parked the car, and headed down the tiled path to the house. Ringing the heavy front doorbell, Rick Smith opened it himself, making an inviting gesture with his hand. He was a well-built man of about 55 in his trademark tracksuit. He looked me over from head to toe. I walked past the owner inside. They're waiting for you upstairs. Smith followed me upstairs. Wendy, they're in my office. I went up the marble staircase and into a long corridor with many doors. One of them was open. It turned out to be a study. The others were probably for bedrooms. Wendy was sitting in a large striped armchair, putting her foot on her leg. She was wearing a drunken Army One color and a short nightgown to match. She looked up at me. Thank you for arriving on time. I apologize for being dressed out of uniform. I don't feel well. Please don't mind me. We exchanged a couple of duty phrases, and the girl's cell phone played. Nancy picked up the phone. Yeah, I'm home right now. I'm meeting you. You miss me. A little, Vanessa. She turned to me. I'll go downstairs and meet the salesgirl. Champagne, wine, brandy, please. The girl pointed to a steamy counter in the middle of the room. Please, please. Thank you. I'm at work. Leaving the doors open, Smith descended the stairs. Taking advantage of the pause, I called my husband again. Again, no answer. I got very nervous. I tried again. I listened to the long ringing tone. Suddenly, I heard a very familiar tune. On some natural instinct, I looked out into the hall and followed the sound. The music was playing in one of the bedrooms. I opened the door to it. The room was done up in shades of blue. On the large wooden bed, under the silk linen, I found my husband's cell phone. For a few seconds, I stood there like a dumbfounded, not knowing what to think or do. A lump rose in my throat, and my stomach clenched treacherously, the excitement making me nauseous. I leaned over and picked up the phone in my hand on the large, glowing display. I saw my face and the signature Vanessa. The doubts were finally dispelled. It was Christopher's phone. I turned it off and slipped it into my pants pocket. I looked up and looked at the bed. There were thin chicks sticking out from under the pillow, bra the same color. Apparently, the hot romps had just recently ended. I wonder if Wendy knows I'm her lover's wife. Probably not. Would she have invited me here then? Maybe this Casanova saw me through the window and slipped out the back door. That would explain the hostess coming out to me in the bar. Feeling as if I were in a dream, I went back into the study and landed in the big striped armchair. In it, I froze like a wax figure for a few minutes. Then I stood up and walked over to the bar. I poured myself a glass of dry red wine, drank it down, and returned to my seat. Smith and his friend came into the office. They were laughing and chatting and suddenly froze, staring at me. Wendy came over and took the empty glass from my hand. "You're very pale. Is something wrong?" "No, I'm fine." "Then I'd like you to meet Vanessa Austin, who is today's authenticator, and Nancy the seller." She introduced us to each other. Nancy was one of the average modern beauties. Eyelash extensions, aggressive manicures, silicone breasts and lips. She tossed her soft black hair out of her face and smiled broadly. Then pulled the porcelain box out of her expensive leather purse and held it out to me. I held back the treacherous trembling in my hands. I cautiously opened the lid and saw a real work of art, an antique ring with a dazzling emerald. I had no doubts about its authenticity, but I examined it with a magnifying glass from all sides. The play of light in the stone and the branding on the inside of the ring confirmed its origin. It was an antique ring from around the middle of the 19th century, the work of an unknown Russian master. I silently wrote up the report and handed it to Smith. I received my reward and politely said goodbye. I couldn't bear to be in that house. It took a great deal of effort to be so calm. I wanted very much to punch the mistress of life, the mistress of fortune, in the face. I was sure that Christopher had absolutely no use for Wendy in the long run. He was her whim and nothing more. A girl like that would never marry a mere servant. I sat in the car for a long time, finding the strength to move. All sorts of thoughts swirled in my head. I spent my days and nights at my sick mother's bedside. Meanwhile, my husband was a frequent visitor to Wendy Smith's bedside. These are the different values in life that Ball did for his own pleasure. And he was complaining to me. I was desperate for a while. But why did he do this to me? Why? I wanted to cry out in my voice. Of course, I had to pull myself together and go home unexplained. I couldn't leave the subject unresolved. I drove through my hometown shimmering with multicolored lights, and a tear involuntarily covered my eyes. At home, I made my husband his favorite goulash with macaroni and vegetable salad. He sat across from me and smiled happily, telling me how the day went at work. I turned to him from time to time from the stove and give him a refill. And I didn't see a shadow of embarrassment in his cross green eyes. From the virtuoso, "Christopher, you're making up stories as you go along. Anderson such tales with details." "That's all right. That's all right. Let me tell you an interesting story. I have no luck with men. They all leave me. When I was a kid, my father left me for a mistress. Apparently, there was no place for me in his life. Now my husband, after 6 years of marriage, has decided, it seems, to stretch his intimate side of life, so to speak. What did he find in Wendy that I didn't? I puzzled over it. Even our looks were very similar. One type of luscious brunette with blue eyes. It's called Find Five Differences. The only thing is my hair is long, straight. His mistress had a short haircut, and my outfits were more modest, and financially. The man probably wanted new sensations and adrenaline. What kind of tribe are you? What kind of animals? My mother never remarried after my husband left her. She sincerely loved me and was very afraid that my stepfather could not replace my father. As you know, men don't need other men's children. They do not owe anyone anything. It is a woman who is obliged to bring up and support their children. All my life we lived with my mom alone. 2 girls abandoned by the man we once loved. As I got older, my father made attempts to communicate with me, but I realized I didn't need him anymore. You can't fix a broken vase. He was no daddy to me. And to communicate because of the fact that our veins run the same blood, I saw no point in it. Of course, he reproached me for being too cruel. But I had to blame someone, not my own. Echidnas on their way to personal happiness. They leave their wives, stop at nothing. They sweep away everything in their path, including their own children. And then they pelt you with complaints. No, sorry, we women are far from you, in cruelty and cunning. Oh, Christopher, Christopher. But what was he missing? Passion, fervor, bone and perversion, money, adrenaline. In 6 years, I've never looked at another man. I guess I should have. Like in that anecdote when a woman appeals to the Holy Father not to drink, not to smoke to her husband, not to bake pies, not to cheat. Am I living right, Father? And he says, my daughter, but for nothing. My husband has decided to take everything from life. He's betting on my love. He thought I'd never leave him. Maybe he didn't love me. It's never been like that. All these years, we've been living soul to soul. I sensed an act. Christopher's not an actor, that's for sure. I felt it in my heart, although I never saw any signs of infidelity until today. It was business as usual. That's what tore at my heart the most. Stupidly giving horns to a knave wife. I wonder how long he self-consciously tumbled in someone else's bed, pretending that all is well with us. His behavior changed somewhat when I had to take care of my mother and hardly ever came home. But I attributed it to a personal grudge. Kashaleva had no idea. Well, I attributed it to a personal grudge gone. I didn't even suspect it. Every morning he was as before, caring and attentive to me and my daughter. And I was justifying him, saying he wasn't a hypocrite. But it was all a lie. I remembered the words of a longtime Christopher. His friend's wife is a potential enemy. That's what they really think of a loved one. Then my husband interrupted my musings. He had had enough and told me his banal thank you. It's delicious. I looked at him and caught myself thinking that I felt uncomfortable talking to him. A feeling of irritation even appeared, but I kept myself in check. I was too calm in the face of what had happened, in a kind of daze, as if it wasn't me, but someone else, and I was just watching from the sidelines. To come to my senses, I took out a bottle of expensive champagne from the kitchen and put it on the table in front of my husband. Oh, he marveled. I just ate for nothing. Christopher grumbled, pushing the drink away from him. No, I smiled. It's a very good reason. That's how. But well, he started pouring the bottle. Meanwhile, I'd found too tall. It's hot. The champagne cork rattled out, and my husband filled the glasses. I moved a chair and sat down. Across from Christopher prepared a cool Bornesh and a sleeping drink. I looked into his eyes. He sat there smiling contentedly, slowly sipping his champagne. I emptied the whole glass and put it on the table. I was listening to you intently at dinner, I began. And here I thought, how do you withstand such loads? At work, problems at home, worrying about his wife, his daughter, and a young mistress. It's incomprehensible. Christopher choked and coughed. His eyes reddened and tears flowed from them. I looked at his face in silence. I wondered how my husband would get out of this situation. Would he confess to the affair, or will he play the fool until the last? But I'd had enough fantasizing. I've had enough champagne too. I'm going to take a shower. Christopher jumped up and almost ran to the bathroom. An hour later, he returned to the kitchen, having had time to change into a clean t-shirt and sports pants. I methodically finished a bottle of champagne, snacking on Daughters, apples and tangerines. Christopher opened the refrigerator and asked me if we had anything to drink. "Why, didn't Wendy pour you one?" I answered. For a moment, it seemed to me that Christopher was terribly surprised by the question. He sank into his chair and filled the glasses with the remaining champagne. We drank in silence and looked into each other's eyes. For some reason, I remembered the scene from Gogol's Revisor, the one that follows after the final line of the revisor comes to us. And there we sat with frozen stares in ringing silence. "Christopher, it's time to explain ourselves," I began. He looked at me questioningly. "Are we having some kind of difficulty again?" He glossed his eyes a lot. "We did not have complications, but a situation that requires a divorce." "What's the reason for being at the Smith house?" "I found your cell phone." I'm not denying I was there. They got a panic button on Lilo's fence. I went to check it out. I took a 3-day vacation for that purpose. I took the vacation to rest. I was tired, but I lost my phone. I was at the oligarch's house, so it's a reason for divorce. I took the phone out of my pocket and silently put it on the table. There was hope in my soul. What if it's true? What if I just made it all up? I was confused. And then the cell phone started to ring. We both stared at the screen and saw a message from Wendy in the ticker. "Come over. Dad won't be here tomorrow morning. I want to finish what we couldn't finish tonight." Christopher took a loud plunge. "What a stupid woman. She can't wait." "Don't look at me. You've got a temper. Is he okay?" I asked judgmentally. "You shouldn't judge a man by a woman's judgment. You've got the wrong judgment in your head about that." I wanted to leave a long time ago. I've been trying to get up the nerve to do it for a while, but it's just never been the right time. "Yeah, well, guess what? I'm in love. I'm just crazy with passion. Such a woman, I'm sorry, but I've never been with you like this before." I thought I'd faint from such words and confessions. I was living with a man, and I didn't know I wasn't sweet on him. But the moment had come. It was all I could say. Though inside I was all pounding and pointing at the door. "Should I leave?" he asked. "You said you were going to go long ago. You're free." "I'm not going to persuade you." I finished the rest of the champagne, got up from the chair, and went into the hall. I turned on the TV. I started flicking through the channels, pretending that I was still watching an interesting program. Soon I heard the front door close with a clatter. I didn't want to get up from the couch. I curled up on it and dozed off. Now I didn't even want to think about saving the marriage. Some women can forgive everything, tolerate humiliation and lies. But for me, it was impossible to accept and pretend that everything was still good. That's how my husband left me. You can't even say that he left me for a prettier woman. So much she and I are similar in appearance, a little younger and wealthy with no domestic problems. Interesting in bed. What's there to guess now? There's no point. The pain is slowly going away. I'm learning to be happy with what I have. I'm reading a lot, helping my mom, raising my daughter. I'm meeting new people. Yesterday morning I met Emily. You are a woman in such a difficult situation and still managed to self-actualize. Before I could think about her, I got a phone call. Hi, Emily. How long are you staying? I was just thinking about our meeting a minute ago. Let's use the first name. Yeah. Why don't you come visit me this week? See the salon. See how I work. I'll be there. I can't refuse such an interesting offer, but I'm still waiting. Free. I had only the second half of Saturday, and all Sunday at Emily just had an average as new these days. The week flew by quickly. Busy and busy. Work, home daycare, laundry, cooking. Rare walks with my daughter in the park near the house. Right after Christopher left, I moved Jenna to a regular daycare center. Now I'm the last one to pick her up. But it's better than being in a 24-hour facility. We get to spend more time together. But this weekend I put my daughter with my mom. She's finally recovered. Emily's trip is encouraging for me too. I felt a kind of boundless trust in her, and I missed female friendship in general. I had girlfriends at school and at the institute, but for family worries and work days, I completely ceased to keep in touch with them. And now, after parting with Christopher, I had free time and wanted to spend it usefully. And I realized that Emily is exactly the person with whom I will not be bored. And by the looks of it, I had a good day off. I arrived at the salon around 20 o'clock, but there were still people crowding in. To my surprise, I didn't see even the slightest hint of white or black magic on the sign. It was a beauty studio called Emily's. Indeed, the press at the front desk offered treatments such as beauty massages, chocolate equipment, tanning beds, and deep cleansing facials. Frankly, I marveled. After all, on the bus, Emily was telling me about something completely different. Then I saw the owner and went to meet her. Her dress code didn't fit my idea of how wizards should be dressed either. At work in the arena was a beautiful silk blouse, turquoise in shade, and a strict black skirt, pencil length, which emphasized the roundness of her knees and the grace of the games. She smiled cordially at me. We embraced, and Emily offered me a tour of her office. It was a room in a strict office style. Ascetic furnishings, a standard desk, an armchair, a computer, shelves with folders. And in the corner on a nightstand, an electric kettle and a ceramic sprinkler. I looked around indifferently and shrugged. But it's all so simple here. And you thought you'd be in the twilight of a medieval castle, and I'd meet you in an outfit. I laughed. Yeah, well, it's like that. I'm dark like that. But you know, our state hasn't gotten to the point of allowing witchcraft to be officially registered as a sole proprietorship. But I can surprise you with something. Follow me. Emily approached the bookcase, built into the wall, and touched a white book, standing out against the other colored ones. A mechanical creak was heard, and I saw the phantom locker pulled aside. A staircase leading downward opened up in front of us. It was already interesting. It was all wooden, and the passageway was done with shaked plaster of a sandy maroon color. The lanterns on the walls were modern, but with a pretension to antiquity in the form of a pair of burning candles on bronze candlesticks. I counted about 7 such lamps. Finally, we descended into a large, spacious room. All its walls were made in the form of shelves, on which stood books. They looked very ancient to me, covered with the dust of centuries. There must have been at least 1,500 of them here. In the middle of the room stood the oval table. It was littered with many glass bottles with colored shimmering liquid, well-deserved sprigs of exotic plants, small straw boxes, votive candles, tall thin candle holders. But here Emily came to the table and sat down in a high chair. It seemed to me to be crafty and very heavy. Its back was decorated fancifully with flowers and colored monograms. It was unknown where it had come from. A velvet burgundy cape appeared in Emily's hands. She threw it on top and put on a hood. Then she lit the candles. At that moment, it seemed to me that her eyes were filled with a kind of unearthly light. "Sit down," she said, pointing to the table at the back of the table. I sat down and caught myself in the thought that I felt some universal awe before this mysterious action. "Do you have a picture of your husband?" a friend asked. "Somewhere." "Let me see. I think in the passport." And I pulled out a picture of our happy past. "Here." I held it out to Emily. She touched it gingerly, and suddenly her beautiful eyebrows rose. "Look, I see a hex on it." "Really?" I was surprised. He turned out to be by nature a good dog. Why else listen to him? A finger and he'll drop his pants. "No, you're wrong. He doesn't really love that woman." Emily looked up at me with sky blue eyes. I read confidence and rightness in them. Strangely, I was actually shocked. "If you want, I can do a reversal." My friend suggested it. "No, because I don't love him anymore." As sad as it is to admit, but unfortunately, the feelings are gone. "Well, it's up to me to suggest it," Emily smiled, throwing off her burgundy cloak. except that such deeds do not go in vain. He will have to be punished. For what? Because she lived. Only she was made so that all the punishment for that act would fall on him. But for now, of course, she'll have to pay for it in the future. But for now, she will not be harmed. A ritual has been performed that allows her to delay the reckoning. That's amazing. Even that can happen. It happens, but let's leave the magic behind and go for some real pleasures. I'm taking you to a restaurant. Oh, I'd love to. We left Emily's lair, and I breathed a sigh of relief. Mystery wasn't really my thing. Georgian wine, shish kebab, lula kebab, warm liver salad made a more positive impression on me. In general, we had a good time. I've been joking like that since my student years. We didn't leave until dawn. Of course, I had to take the day off work. Somehow, I didn't calculate my strength, but I made a deal with my friend like I drank water. And Emily tried to warn me a couple of times that there would be problems with my ex-husband, but I did not want to hear anything about him and asked her not to even mention his name. I really relaxed, danced a lot, and allowed myself to flirt with men. Of course, 2 of those would have gotten the attention of the entire male contingent of the restaurant. It's a shame. Few were the ladies they came here with. It's a good thing there wasn't a jealousy scandal yet, because we were very relaxed and fired up from the heart. In general, the starting exit of girlfriends took place and was very successful. Monday, I was sick at home. It's good that my daughter was in the caring hands of her grandmother. Mom only sighed, listening to my story on the phone. Well, my daughter, you're really something. You still have to be careful. Such walks for the body do not pass in vain, she instructed me to Jenna. Don't worry. We're good. Fine and good. You know how we're friends, right? After the phone conversation with my mom, I drank aspirin and a few liters of mineral water and fell sweetly asleep. I didn't get up until about 4 in the afternoon. I happily took a shower and wrapped a towel around 6. Sat down in the kitchen to drink tea with lemon. The strength was returning. The state was blissful. All the symptoms of a hangover had left me, and my head was empty. The intrusive feelings and emotions had receded. I sat there and laughed to myself, remembering our weirdness of yesterday. But I didn't have to stay in a happy state of rebooting for long. The phone rang. The display showed a brisk walker. It was my ex-husband. I didn't want to talk to him, but natural responsibility took over. Hi, Vanessa. Christopher said hello. Hello. Coldly, I replied. If you want to know how Jenna is doing, I'll call her myself. She's a big girl. She'll answer all your questions on her own. No, it's not about that. I just want to remind you that the apartment you're living in is in my name, and Wendy and I thought about it and decided to move in. To say that I was surprised by this statement is not to say anything, because I almost fell off my chair, and I was expecting anything. Some kind of clarification of relations, statement of past offenses, unjustified reproaches. And here it is. Yeah, he's just throwing me out on the street. I mean, Jenna's studio apartment is unfinished. It's all concrete walls, no plumbing, no lights. Are you out of your mind? Are you crazy? I asked. Vanessa, without getting into a debate, but why do you think that everything should belong to you? I don't understand you. What's in the mansion? There's not enough room. I don't want to live with him. I'm used to living apart. The husband retorted. So you'll bring your roommate into our apartment, and you'll throw me and my daughter out. Don't exaggerate, please. I'm not throwing you out. You have your mom's apartment. I expected anything but this. What kind of asshole are you? Absolutely no conscience. I hung up in despair. The next morning, when I showed up at my mom's place with a bunch of olives, she looked at me confusedly and marched her eyes frequently. What's that? It's a move, Mom. Christopher and his anger will now live in our apartment. That's how Mom got her room in the back. On what grounds? On legal grounds. I signed it over to him, stupid with a deed of gift. Finita la commedia, crying my immovable property. Daughter, it's not in good conscience. He'll come to his senses. He was a decent man. The key word, Mom, is decent. I don't jump on other people's bunks, and they don't kick out legitimate wives and children from the apartment, especially if it was bought with my savings. All the bonuses and 13 went to some strange woman. That's when Mom burst into tears. That's enough, Mom. Tears can't help the grief. It's driving up my blood pressure too. And you'll have Jenna once. I calmed her down. I don't have the energy to take her to the garden today. Let her stay home and I'll go to work. Apparently, I have to get a new place to live. Mom calmed down and stroked my head affectionately. Maybe you should stay with us tonight. No, Mom. I asked to come yesterday, and I've taken care of a little business. I'm home, and I'm gonna be thinking about things at home. I gave her a peck on the cheek and went to the jewelry store. On my lunch break, I was able to carve out some time to call Emily. I recounted the conversation with my ex-husband to her in detail. See, I told you he was going to be a lot of trouble. There's a cloud of upheaval hanging over him. He's acting like a robot, like a voodoo doll. He only sees where his mistress directs his gaze. It's like he has no side vision. So everything in the narrow corridor in front of his eyes is available for him to see. And what's to the side he can't see at all, or he can see through a veil. I'm talking about you and Jenna. That's why his conscience mechanisms don't work. That's terrible. I was outraged. But that's not all. He's going to be in big trouble soon. I don't know how he's doing, but I've already been hit by every conceivable and unthinkable misfortune. Now we're gonna embarrass Mom. Mom, you have a good support in life. When Stephen left me, I went to my mom's house with the kids too. But she wasn't very happy to see us. My parent, without going into details. She wouldn't even listen to a word I said, but it was a torrent of recriminations. We thought with my father that at least in our old age, we'd have a normal life. And then you showed up with the kids. You should have thought of something better to avoid a divorce. Before it's too late, fall at your husband's feet. Ask him back. So we went back to town, with nothing to show for it, like we did at first. It's scary to remember. I thought about what my friend said, and I suddenly felt sorry for my mom. Her care, love, and support was taken for granted. And it's true that not everyone is so lucky in life. I remembered her helpless eyes this morning, and after work I stopped by the candy store. I bought the native potatoes especially for her. She had loved them since childhood. After dinner, we sat down to drink tea, and she praised me relentlessly for the attention she had shown me. And I kept thinking that I would never be able to repay her for her unconditional love and sacrifice. And I was also very happy that I had these two beauties who would never betray me. Mom, we're not going back to that apartment. Jenna was wondering. Apparently not, I answered, looking at her pigtails, which her mom lovingly poured into her. Well and good, summarized the daughter. Why not? In two voices asked her, we do not need to leave Grandma. The girl laughed, and we followed her. A few months passed, and our life went back to normal. Mom's modest 2-month-old house became a cozy home for us. We took the bedroom and left a more spacious hall to our beloved grandmother. To save space, I bought a mezzanine bed. On it, my daughter and I quite comfortably settled down. She's downstairs and I'm upstairs. We divided up the chores easily too. I took Jenna to daycare in the morning and picked her up in the evening. I did the grocery shopping on the weekends and cleaned up. Mom did the cooking. It was a definite advantage of living with her. After all, such delicious pies or porridge for granddaughter will not answer anywhere else. I tried to spend more time with my girls, so in the first half of Saturday to put in order in the rooms and wash laundry, so that on Sunday we could all get out together to the stores or for walks. On these outings we were often and happily accompanied by Emily. In general, our time was so clearly organized that there was no time to think about bad things or to be sad about our feminine destiny. Besides, the long-awaited August was approaching, and we were planning to go to the seacoast with all our female company, not to change the established traditions because one person sat out, The best stayed close by. And so nose to the wind. I, Emily, and my mother, with enthusiasm, plunged into the search for suitable places for the trip, studied hotels, list of entertainment, catering facilities, the structure of beaches, and reviews of vacationers. Full of anticipation, we walked around satisfied and happy. We hadn't signed a vacation application. And at that moment, when we were literally sitting on suitcases, I got a call from Christopher the boss. "Vanessa, I need to have a serious talk with you." He started from afar. "Why?" I was surprised. "Christopher has a new family now. I have nothing to do with him." "I see." John sighed heavily. "But I still hope you'll listen to me. But there's no charge for that, as they say." "I'm all ears," I told him. "You haven't spoken to Christopher for a long time, and you don't know he had a heart attack." "Yeah, I really didn't know. It was nothing. The doctors got him out, and now he needs good care." "You don't say." "And his new wife can't provide that. As I understand it, Vanessa, she can, but she doesn't want to." "How's that?" "It's like this. She's a Belarusian, and she doesn't want to spend money on him. Now he's become unnecessary ballast for her. He can't provide her with a rich emotional life." I realize that he can't, and not just emotionally. "Yes, you're making a good point. Please tell me what you want from me, John. But maybe you can at least visit him now. He's probably been medically discharged." "So, no family, no kids. Who's to blame for that? It's his own fault. Men go through life like obsessed men, pursuing some mythical goal. And along the way, their most precious possessions fall out of their pockets. So I'm just calling to hope for a purely human attitude. I feel sorry for him. Besides, he's Jenna's father. That father hasn't mentioned her in a long time. I resented him. Forgive me, but maybe I shouldn't have called and stirred up your life." "It's okay, John. We'll figure it out. Thank you for calling and thank you for listening, Vanessa." "You're welcome. Goodbye." I hung up the phone at a complete loss. On the one hand, we were used to living without Christopher, and Jenna was just recovering from the breakup. She used to bring him up more often, now to traumatize the child again. On the other hand, even though I no longer had respect for the man in my heart, I didn't consider him a stranger. I sighed sadly and decided to visit him after all. I didn't recognize my former apartment. It was obvious that the new owner didn't want it. Christopher looked up in surprise. When he saw me on the doorstep, "Come in, please, welcome," he invited me in. I looked at the man and did not recognize him. He had lost a lot of weight. I hustled over. Illness had added years to his life, yet he had conversations with me that revolved around his feelings. Wendy. My feelings didn't seem to touch him. He was reluctant to talk about the doctor's prescriptions, the strict regimen, and treatment. It's true, he told the story of how this misfortune happened to him. But in between those stories, he talked nonstop about his beautiful and caring young wife. "So where is she, this wife of yours?" I asked her defiantly. "Yes, she has important things to do, and she is opening a new store. You know how much fuss there is, and in my opinion, nothing more important. There are no close people in life. She left you sick and disappeared for a few days. Look at the filth in the apartment. What do you look like now? Have you eaten today?" I took out of the bag the containers of home-cooked food my mom had carefully prepared. "No, I'm not hungry. I'm hungry. No appetite. And Wendy, you shouldn't say that. And she doesn't deserve reproach. That woman is the best thing that ever happened to me." I was struck by what I'd seen, and it made me boil. "You're going to die alone here like a dog. Here, look at the doctor's report," which came to the department, and I threw in his face a copy of the document, which at my own risk provided me John. "You could go to the afterlife at any moment if you don't take care of your health in time. And you're still learning about your own rich self, aren't you? Let her take care of you, since you've been praising her so much, and you kicked us out with a kick in the ass." Christopher wanted to say something in reply, but I didn't even listen. I turned around and walked out of the apartment. slamming the door loudly. I dialed Arena as soon as I got outside, and I was filled with indignation. What kind of man is ready to put his life on the altar to some mythical feeling? Passers-by looked at me in surprise because I was sobbing in my voice, telling my friend details of my meeting with my ex-husband. She tried to calm me down, and finally she succeeded. When I came to my senses, Emily suggested that we do it out of the gate. If he makes a decision or wants to end his life so ignominiously, let him do it on his own, and I will try to free him from the shackles this woman has put on him. I realize that you've become indifferent to him as a man, but we're talking about saving a soul here. We're giving him back his freedom of choice. Well, he follows this woman around like a mannequin without seeing her sinfulness, her flaws. And the most important thing he doesn't see is that she only needed him as a male, and when he got sick, he was scrapped. As a man, she's not interested in him. She'll be even better off if he throws himself away. She'll be able to squeeze him without shame. You've got the last one. Fight for the inheritance. I listened attentively to my friend, and she convinced me that she was right. Let's do it. After all, you're absolutely right. I don't really believe in it, but there must be a world of subtle matter out there. But you should know better. Just do it. At home, I discussed the situation with my mom, and together we decided that Christopher needed help. It was obvious that Wendy didn't need him at all, and it was obvious that he was going to have a hard time recovering without help. I looked at my mom and was once again struck by her generosity. And when it became necessary to take care of her, Christopher jumped into the bushes and destroyed all my nerves by accusing me of all earthly sins. His parents had died long ago, but he spoke of them with warmth. Why was my husband so indifferent to my mother? Maybe he had already had a spell on him, which only does not go to my head. So instead of a long-awaited vacation, I returned to the apartment of my ex-husband. At first he waited for his Wendy, but she never even called him, and all his attempts to contact her were unsuccessful. The woman simply closed the door to his life, hung up on him, and didn't answer his messages. After a while, Christopher's behavior began to change. Either Emily had successfully turned him away, or he'd gotten his brain back on track. He started begging me for Jenna to move back into the apartment. He complained that he missed his daughter so much. I looked at him, and I could actually see the inexpressible sadness in my ex-husband's eyes. All right, I'll ask Jenna if she wants to live with us. She loves visiting her grandmother. Yes, Molly is a wonderful person, Christopher agreed with me, and I've been unfair to her in the past. One must honestly admit one's mistakes, and to you he lowered his head. I realized he really had a lot of regrets. Enough of the sad stuff, since I'm like a nurse to you now. Let's talk about the good stuff so you can recover faster. I went back to my business. Christopher nodded silently. Thank you for nothing. Since I didn't get a good rest on vacation, I decided to clean up my husband's den in a matter of days. The apartment became cozy, clean, and fresh again. I then consulted several cardiologists, and those, in addition to all the medication prescriptions, recommended that I keep my spouse on a targeted diet to keep the food from being too bland. I was wary of the seasoning knot. It was quite difficult to find a salt-free option in the stores. At first, Christopher was reluctant and grumpy to start the new diet. But then he got involved, and I together with him to cook for myself one thing, and I was not used to it. So I ate everything that was good for my husband. By the way, significantly built up the food. In addition to all this, I regularly went for walks together with him and took my spouse together with my daughter to the forest. She began to communicate well with Christopher, forgetting all her childhood offenses. I could see that they were good together and that he recovered faster from talking to the child. In short, we were living as if nothing bad had happened, like in our better days. I don't know, but for some reason I felt it was my duty to pull Christopher out of the hopelessness of loneliness and illness. And with each passing day, my ex-husband surprised me with positive changes. It's like he's thought out. Like in that children's fairy tale about the Snow Queen, When Kai had a mole removed from his heart, Emily assured me it was because a spell had been broken. And deep down, I believed her. My husband was back to the way I remembered him before the divorce. Soft, caring, and attentive. Our conversations were casual and easy. He often asked me to apologize for cheating, but I avoided the subject. I did not want to shake his already fragile health. But one day his superior came to visit him, and at the same time to solve some of the subtleties of the dismissal of my ex-husband from the guard. They talked for a long time by the lamp in the kitchen, and through the open door I could hear part of their conversation. "Look, you don't have to tell," John Christopher taught. "Try to win back your wife's trust. You know I had the same thing when I was young. I never told anyone, but now I'm opening up to you, just for psychological support. You know, I've been married a long time, and Sophia and I have a great life. It never occurred to me to trade her for someone else. But one day, we young interns were sent on a business trip, me and Jack. I can't even remember the purpose of the trip. There was some kind of bureaucratic misunderstanding with a local district officer, and we went to check up on him. Although we were young and inexperienced, but at that time there was a shortage of personnel, so the bosses took a risk. So we ended up in a rural wilderness, and instead of a hotel, they put us in a small one-room apartment. I was already like a ringed bird. Christopher was still a free pirate. He loved going out on business trips, but here I was hoping for a quiet life. Who would he meet in the middle of nowhere? But it wasn't to be. Already on the first day, he had a fling with the locals. He picked them up somewhere in a cafe, but they decided to walk him to the entrance. And of course, he suggested they go upstairs. The girls refused, but on the third day, he did break them down. Their names were Miranda and Sophia. They were simple village girls, lonely and not needed by anyone. And here in front of them, two visiting gentlemen with epaulets. On the last day, we decided to celebrate the completion of our affairs, and his acquaintances came to our lake lug. It must be said that the villagers were very individual. They quickly prepared the table. On it flaunted several salads of meat and fruit, cut on the apartment. Floated intoxicating smell of baked chicken. The atmosphere was light and casual. Sophia and Miranda Bay were laughing at our jokes. Robert was leafing through vodka as he snacked on large pieces of chicken for the last time. I really wanted to sleep, and there was nowhere to lie down. When my eyes were completely glued shut, Sophia dragged me out to dance to a slow tune coming from the TV. I drank beer all evening, and only as I swayed in the dance did I realize that I wasn't swaying significantly anymore. I felt like I was in control of myself, but I wasn't. Anyway, in the morning I found a naked Sophia girl next to me. Ironically, her name was the same as my wife. The embarrassment didn't last long because we were in a hurry to get to the train station, and I didn't have time to fully realize my deeds. Soon the nightmare of the feast ceased to haunt me. The fast train was carrying us away from the dying village. I had little memory of what we had with Sophia, but Robert said he had heard the girl's contented moans during the night. He praised me for not introducing manhood even when drunk. There was not a day after that in my life that I did not recall that incident without embarrassment and shame. My partner's laughter, his face, I still can't understand how it happened or why it was necessary. All the way back, Robert was teasing me, tried to make conversation, spinning me for details, but I kept my mouth shut and wondered how I'd look my wife in the eye. At home, I was ready to fall through any slant. I took my wife's look as a warning signal. I thought I was about to be exposed. I thought she knew everything, hated me, and judged me. At first, I couldn't even sleep. I was studying and often got up to go to the bathroom at night. Soon, the feeling of guilt came out of my inexplicable behavior, my desire to earn Sophia's forgiveness. I literally caught every word she said and ran to fulfill her every whim. "Look, John, maybe you didn't have anything with Sophia in that village, eh?" asked Christopher when the chief finished telling the story. "You don't remember anything, and Sanik could have said something about you or played a joke on you. That's it. Maybe it didn't happen. Who's going to find out now? John answered sadly. We're not all sinless. Christopher said confidently. I know that for sure. Only some of us do evil on purpose, and some of us do it accidentally. Some repent of their deeds, and some do not. You know what I mean? To be honest, not really. The boss was puzzled. It seems to me that even if you had something then, Christopher continued, changing to a whisper, so you have long since redeemed it with your suffering, you know. John nodded happily. Their conversation was interrupted by me because Christopher needed to take his pills by the hour. I smiled and said thank you for visiting. You're always welcome. Say hello to your wife. The man shuddered and hurried to say goodbye. A month later, Christopher was strong enough to live on his own. What was his surprise when Jenna and I packed up and notified him that we were planting. At this point, my ex-husband looked discouraged. He had hoped things would stay the same. I explained to him that his dreams were foolish and untenable because everything in me was burned out after his betrayal. I walk around like an extinguished candle and have no feelings for him other than pity. We agreed that we would maintain a friendly relationship. I allowed him to communicate freely with Jenna. He begged us to stay for a long time. But then he gave up in grief, turned gloomy, and silently went to the kitchen. We went back home to my mom's house. For a long time, I didn't date anyone because I didn't trust men anymore. But from time to time, I had a beau. But I never got serious. Apparently, I didn't even give them a chance to recharge. So for years, I lived by the same script. Work, home, vacation. I stayed friends with Emily. Her love life was going great. It was great. She met someone who really connected with her, and they started living together. They didn't get married. They didn't think they should. Christopher saw his daughter every weekend. They'd call me back. He was aware of all our family affairs and even helped with household issues. But despite the fact that it has been more than 10 years since our breakup, I have not completely forgiven my ex-husband. And yesterday, on our wedding anniversary, I wanted to visit him. So I drove over unannounced. I rang and knocked on the door for a long time, but no one opened the door. I was kind of scared, assuming something terrible. Then I went out into the yard, admiring the yellowed leaves around me. There were children playing on the playground and old people sitting on the benches. I was about to go back to my car. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice. It was Christopher telling a graceful, pretty girl something exciting. Engrossed in the conversation, they didn't notice me. I stood behind them and listened to the conversation. At first, they were interchanging meaningless phrases, then about unpleasant neighbors, then about prices. But then I heard something that made me sit down on the edge of the sandbox and dive into their life stories with bated breath. Here are their stories in full. You know, Lisa, I had a heart attack at a young age. What's 35 years old for a man? Christopher began. And now I live every day like it's my last. No, I didn't come to that all at once. I came to it through my wife, whom I lost irrevocably. What kind of person is she? I didn't realize it right away. 1 in 1 million. Now only memories of our happy family life remain. I'm not afraid to use big words. She's a saint of a woman. I'm lucky to have her. And I'm just an idiot. It's my own fault for a lifetime of heart attacks. I chased after a young girl, mistook a game of blood for real feeling. I mean, she almost drove me into a coffin using me as a sex machine. But Vanessa, you're literally not a dummy. Where would I be right now if it wasn't for her heart of gold? I'm telling you, she's a saint of a woman. There's a reason they say all our illnesses come from nerves. On my own skin, I realized that mine are also from nerves, and selfishly treating myself would not have left the family then. Maybe life would have been different, happy and full. I married her out of great love. She appeared in my life as a ray of light in these lightless, gray, everyday life. I went to the movies on my day off from the service. The interesting thing is that I was going with a friend, and she with a friend. And supposedly, these two were supposed to sit next to each other. And since they didn't go, we ended up sitting next to each other. Destiny. I paid attention to her because she was very worried about what was happening on the screen. I was very surprised by such openness and sincerity. I thought, such girls are no longer found. She had me hooked. And the whole session Vanessa was watching the movie, and I was watching her. And after the end, of course, I rushed to see her off. We started seeing each other, and I was flying on wings to her. Every moment spent with this girl seemed like an extraordinary happiness. I couldn't get enough of her amazing beauty. I always admired the warmth of her soul. I realized that I had fallen in love, because without her I was anxious, but with her I felt good and calm, light, always at heart and joyful. Only after I understood and loved her as a person, a physical attraction was born in me. It should be like that, not the other way around. Passion, not empty of mind, leaving ashes in the soul. And true love is tender and delicious. It makes you a better person. It may be sacrificial. You've deprived yourself of something, but your loved one will be cared for and respected. It's a really wonderful feeling that's enriching. And passions tear you apart and shorten the years of your life. It took me a year to decide to propose. Finally, I talked to Vanessa about getting married. I was terrified of rejection. A lot of people had put themselves out there for her, but I didn't want to put it off. There was nowhere else to go, for shy will take away. So asked for her hands with a swing, to remember the ring with a stone bought. A bouquet of roses beautiful, and in a good cafe invited, and the whole evening sat there, clutching the velvet box in his hand. All he could do was give her flowers, and then went to walk her home, and already at the entrance blurted out, say, "Maybe you'll marry me. I'll make you happy. I'll love you all my life." Vanessa immediately agreed, as if she had been waiting for these words. We married and had a modest celebration. We went to the sea. We lived for a week. A year later, we had a daughter. The family was strong and friendly. It was like living in paradise with them. You'd come home, tired from the service. The girls hug you, kiss you, and there's a delicious dinner on the table. Luckily, there was no limit to my happiness. I served in the organs. I liked the job, and the money was decent. But Vanessa earned more. She was employed in a jewelry salon, where the daily revenue was as much as a dozen of my salaries. Her day was irregular. He barely had time to pay attention to his daughter. And then her mother got sick, and his wife was torn to shreds. And I did not, to pity and help, began to nag her for the fact that she does not notice me at all. Then I meet another woman, and she took me with her resemblance to Anna. My quiet life was over. I was so enchanted by Wendy that I became completely unresponsive. She favored me, and I suited her well as a lover. I had no intention of becoming infatuated with her, and I didn't realize how it happened. Wendy replaced my wife, and seemed more interesting and better. And then I started to pine for her and miss her. I did things every minute of every day. I betrayed my family, which I can't forgive myself for to this day. When I mentally returned to that time, it seems to me that I lived in a fog and through some kind of veil saw reality. It was just a bright spot that wasn't so strange. I don't even remember the first time I saw her. It was like she'd always been there. And Vanessa and Jenna had been a dream. It's clear now, of course, that I acted as a doggy for Wendy, who was comfortable giving commands to leg or shoe. She kept pushing for a divorce from my wife, as if she wanted to marry me. But we never officially registered our relationship. We lived in a common law marriage. It was hard to call it a marriage. Wendy was busy with her life, and I was working all the time. We didn't have a home or a family. I came home late at night and often spent time alone with a glass of cognac or the television. Wendy could show up in the middle of the night well tipsy and explain her absence by meeting friends or socializing with her father. But I was in awe of her and treasured the crumbs of attention she lavished on me. Ugly and lopsided was this bond. One day I snapped. I just couldn't stand another wait, and the jabs of jealousy built up to hell. Failed to report for duty and almost lost his stripes. Thanks to the chief, he covered up the immorality. He always sympathized with me because we were easy to work around. When I was drunk, I spent 24 hours shaking in some suburban train, got off at an abandoned platform, and found myself practically in an empty field. Walked to a small village and waited another 24 hours for transportation to get out of there. Crouched in the streets, thanks to the village women who fed me and poured moonshine. Otherwise, I'd probably have died. And then he had a heart attack out of the blue. What a sad and touching story. I heard that your wife got out after her illness. Our grandmothers still talk about it on the bench. The interlocutor stretched out enthusiastically. And here's a hint. She asked, "You are such a wise man who has seen a lot of things in life. Can I ask you for advice?" "You know, Lisa, giving advice is a thankless business," Christopher replied without a moment's hesitation. "Where is the guarantee that the advice will hit the bullseye? I still can't deal with my life. And here you need to take responsibility for the fate of the one to whom you give advice." "No, but of course, I cannot disagree," continued his interlocutor. "But I have no idea how to be, and there are no loved ones around. Give me a hint. Have you not had a situation when you did not know how to act?" "Oh, of course I have. I still do. The most important lifeline remains in limbo. It seems to have improved relations with my wife, but we live apart. I still don't know if she's coming back to me, or if it's finally over. You know, Lisa, I'm here with you. Open up and realize that I'll try to help you. I told you, and it just made me feel better. Why don't you just spit it out for me? I'll listen, and then we'll talk about it." The mere voicing of a problem can give an impetus to modeling in our head different options for its solution. Maybe not immediately, but only after clarifying questions and clear human participation of the people you have confided in. "You are right, Christopher. Especially I still have a topic such that it is difficult to tell my loved ones," informed his girlfriend. "Well, then you're on the right track. Fate has sent you a man to whom you can trust your secret. I know you only in passing, so it will be the effect of an accidental hitchhiker. Yeah, you know, I just kind of gravitated to you guys right away. I feel in my soul that you can help me in this story and keep my secret." Lisa replied with a sad smile. "If you want, I can listen without pressure," but firmly said Christopher. "Of course, I can't promise you ready advice, but I can definitely reflect on your life twists and turns, and with partiality. And nothing that the conversation will touch on racy topics. Embarrassed girl. Well, to not make me laugh. I am not a boy from kindergarten, and a mature man, especially if in general terms. Details, of course, someone else's intimate life, I will not quite interested." Grinning, replied my ex-husband. The girl took the phone out of her pocket, looked at it, put it back. She drew air into her chest and began her story. "I listened to your story and thought, what deep feelings guided you. How hard it is for you to get over your mistakes. The agony of divorcing your wife. But with us young people, it's like we're more lighthearted, frivolous, I'd say, shallow, and a lot of selfish tendencies. No one wants to sacrifice their own needs for their family. And as I understand it, if each of us doesn't invest in it, it will cease to exist. But that's not the way it is for us right now, not the way it is for you. For you, divorce is a tragedy. But for people my age who know me, it's just the way things are. And some of them have had several divorces and several marriages. I'm about the age you are now, and I'm divorced. I'm 34 years old right now. I've had kind of a nice life. I've had a good education, a lucrative position in a government agency, married at 27, and not by marriage, but by love with her husband. We lived for ourselves for a couple of years. We sort of adapted to each other. We wanted a child. We made the decision together. And here came the desired pregnancy. My husband was in seventh heaven, jumping like a hare. I fulfill every whim. He's a few years older than me, and he's been through a divorce. He had no children in that marriage. We worked together at the same company. That's where he noticed me. And from the first day, he started to pay attention to me. I was cold at first, and then he managed to win me over with his charm and sparkling humor. I was still very careful with him, because before we began to meet seriously, I remember that one of the staff whispered in my ear that something like cunning your suitor. He doesn't wear rings, but he hasn't broken up with his wife. And indeed, at one of the company parties, he came with her. It was not a woman, but a bomb such at Satsa, well-groomed from top to toe. Eyelashes like eyelashes on a sip of window nasty, expensive makeup, hairstyle, shoes mind-boggling, worth probably as much as my monthly salary. The figure, even golden tan, I was blown away. I was a lot more modest looking than her. Well, you can see for yourself. I'm short, thin, with a straight mustache, hair, gray eyes. Pretty, but not outstanding, so to speak, sweet. And this is such a queen. When I saw her, I almost didn't. I didn't open it for good. I said, how could you go for another woman with such a woman? You could paint pictures with her. And he told me I'm not an artist to paint pictures, but a full-fledged man. I need a family, a child, and a wife. Not to run around in salons, but to wait in the kitchen with delicious borscht. But she can have children. She's not sick. She just doesn't want to. I'd wait. What's there to wait for the weather? You know, Kelly is obsessed with beauty. She gets up in the morning. She's all about herself. Even if she had a baby, she wouldn't need it. It would take up her time. And she's terrified that her monumental looks will be ruined. Do you want kids? Do you? Georgie asked me. I do, but from a good man. I must be sure that after the birth of a child, he will be a worthy father and will not return tail to the left. I answered firmly. Therefore, I do not want to give birth immediately after marriage and still look at my chosen one. Can I trust him completely? You say that as if you already have a fiancé. Georgie grinned, and you ask as if I only think about it. Look, I have a lot of papers. I need to work with them. And you're sitting here distracting me as if you were interrogating Kekum. If I want, I'll get married. Don't worry about me. After this conversation, Lyonia stopped his pestering me at work, but after 6 months came to me at a table in a cafe across from our office, where we had lunch every day, and again resumed his exciting topic. He laid out his divorce certificate in front of me, and he asked me with forcefulness if I would date him or not, whether or not I would respond to his advances or turn my nose up at him. Well, he's a very specific guy. He's got to have his I's and T's straightened out, but I was impressed with his move. I thought he was serious about me, and I thought a man was serious about me, and I gave him an affirmative answer. And then he got so busy, he was like a light bulb. Tended beautifully for Flowers Candy, took to the movies, restaurants, and even helped on the job will come running as his Rito, and sits near me for hours to make me feel better. But then, properly with a beautiful ring and on one knee, he proposed. I said yes. We got married, and I moved in with him to live in a small 2-room apartment that he had inherited from his grandmother. I became a full-fledged mistress in it, both in everyday life and in communication. It was easy for us with Georgie. He, having the experience of marital relations, always cleverly avoided conflicts, knew where it was better to keep silent, and how to smooth out sharp edges. And finally, his dream came true. I got pregnant. He was tactful and considerate, but I began to notice a change in his behavior. He always slept at home, and then he started missing nights at work, and I was on maternity leave. Then he talked me into quitting my job to take care of our baby after the birth. When you're home alone all day, all sorts of thoughts come into your head, and it's depressing. To pass the time, I reconnected with a former classmate. I saw her at an appointment at the women's clinic and realized that she was also expecting a child. So we started talking a lot. And then one day, she took me out for a walk and have fun. And not just in the park to wander around, but so that shopping, cafes, and all that. I didn't really want to go on such a binge because I was only a month away from giving birth. But Lisa wouldn't let it go. Let's just go shopping. We got bored quickly. We were tired. We landed at an outdoor cafeteria. We ordered a salad, and since it was just about lunchtime, and in the parking lot next to it, I noticed my husband's car. And I look, and he's walking right up to it. Not alone, but with Kelly's ex-wife, and she's in the car with him. And I'm sitting there with my eyes wide open, watching the show. My friend's trying to get me to stop, and I'm numb. With trembling hands, I pick up the phone, dial his number. When asked, "Where are you?" he says he's at work in Kosovo. "I was just about to call you. I missed you. Don't worry. I'll be late again today." She saw my condition and walked me home. There I was in shock till evening. I couldn't eat or drink. One thought was very proving. My unborn child will have to grow up without a father. I tried to pull myself together, ate normally, drank tea with lemon, wiped the traitorous tears from my cheeks. I decided to find out everything calmly and without hysterics. Husband came closer to midnight, and I asked him leading questions like, "How was the working day?" Did I lie? And then I took it in the forehead. "Georgie, what was I gonna ask you? What about Kelly? Is she dating or married?" Trying not to show interest, I asked her quietly. "I don't know anything about her." My husband replied with a smile. "And I thought you at least sometimes call or see each other." I continued. "What the hell do I need her for?" "Let him live his life," she replied calmly. This his unwavering knocked me out of my rut. I already thought that against the background of pregnancy, I have some kind of psychosis developed, and I took another woman for my ex-husband. Although why does he walk around with some ladies during working hours, and even more so, he puts them in the car? He's lying to me, saying he was at work. I continued the interrogation. "And you know, I was walking today and saw you walking with her," I blurted out. "Wow." Watching me amazed and even with some irony answered Georgie question to question. "So you were with her?" Ignoring his sarcasm, I interrogated with her. "My husband did not deny it, and I didn't tell you because you will understand everything perversely." So I'd already understood. "Maybe you can explain." I saw my husband with my eyes. "I don't know if I should," he answered evasively. Now it doesn't matter what my reaction is. "Once you've started, tell me the rest of the story. And I'm asking for the truth, not to disappoint me with naive fairy tales." "All right," I agreed. Husband insists that here's the truth. Uterus. I'm dating Kelly. As a man, I need a full sex life. And your doctor told you not to. And I'm worried about the baby. It's not like she's going to lose it. I don't go to brothels and cheat on you with suspicious women. I go to her for pleasure and health. I, of course, from such behavior was just shocked. And that day I was not able to talk further. I was shaking all over. I locked myself in the bedroom and did not let him in. The next day, he came home from work on time. Then I asked him how long he planned to continue his relationship with his ex-wife. He said he didn't want to upset me and was worried that I was nervous. After all, it was only a short time before the birth. So he put a stop to adultery and no more knee-jerk behavior. My husband kept his promise. And when my son was born, Kevin always tried to be there for me and helped me with everything. We spent a lot of time together, the three of us, and at night till the sun got up and diapers changed and took care of nutrition for feeding Fruit, often when shopping. After work I brought bulks of provisions and unloaded them. Sometimes he cooked dinner too. During this period, he became irreplaceable for me, and I did not suspect him of anything, forgave, and accepted him. I was glad that Kevin had such a caring father, and I had a loving husband. But 2 years later, he started coming home late from work again. I didn't know. Really, it's an unexpected emergency. Or was it another relationship with Kelly? But soon I got tired of worrying too much, and I decided to demand from my husband even bitter, but the truth. Filled Lenka provocative questions, to which he shook his head and revealed that he was again dating his ex-wife. We practically 2 years did not call and did not cross paths, he said. But then one day when I was shopping at the hypermarket, I bumped into her. That's when it all started again. You know Lisa, but how can you not fall for it? You saw her. You're taking care of the baby. No makeup, in a bathrobe, walking the stroller on the playground. And there she is. But remember, you told me yourself that her looks are clingy. Then why don't you live with her at all? If you liked Mia Rose, I asked indignantly. I remember what I said about her. She really is a beautiful woman. But you told me that your family was more important to you than a glossy cover girl. And you wanted an heir. Yes, I remember that too. Georgie replied glumly. So make your choice. Finally, stay with me or Kelly. How long can I forgive you? And this two-family life of yours, I've already made things right with you once. I can't take it anymore. And Kevin will be older. What am I gonna tell them about you when you're, like, at work and in someone else's bed? And wouldn't you believe it, Christopher, he left me back for his wife and his son. We divorced quickly enough, but his communication with his son I did not prevent. After all, a child needs a father. I moved in with my parents. Georgie spent every weekend with us. He took Kevin for walks, and at home he sat and played with him. My parents were sympathetic to his visits. After all, he helped both my son and me financially. Of course, I told my friend about my trouble. She began to visit her often. And as soon as her older brother got divorced, David started courting me. And he was so assertive, hinting that he wanted me and his child to ride in a stroller together with Kevin. So soon he moved me and my son in with him. He treated my Georgie very well and did not prevent him from coming to see Kevin. And then one day, when I was getting my son together for his birthday, he was going to be 3 years old. David was away on a business trip, and we were celebrating at home in a close family circle. I called a few buddies of my new job's girlfriend, dad, and mom. And of course, he showed up. We had a good, fun time. Kevin rejoiced, presented with toys, and my ex-husband volunteered to help me. After the holiday, when everyone dispersed, helped, and then passionately embraced me and kissed me. But he and I also woke up under the same blanket. It was awkward, but he pretended that nothing had happened between us. We talked like we used to. And then it happened again every time he came to visit his son. David, as it happens, was very tactful, and he always left when the ex-husband came to visit the child, so as not to embarrass us. So he let us off the hook. And for a year now, he's been my lover. And I'm sorry, Christopher is sleeping with 2 men. David, he offers me his hand in marriage. If I told Georgie about it, he'd freak out, even though I explained to him that he'd made his choice. I didn't even ask him how he and Kelly were doing. I'm divorced and in a war to do anything. He, of course, was very nervous and freaking out over my independence, told me that he found another of his Kelly rich man charmed and married him. He is elderly, he has grown children, and so he does not require her to change and give birth to him. In general, everything suits her. She's also got a young lover. Kelly's turned a corner. Ex-husband now hints that I broke off relations with David and returned to him. He says we've had our pity, and that's enough. We have a family and a son together. That's the story of my Christopher. And this fight just happened the other day. I'm wondering what to do next. Okay, what are you thinking about? Christopher asked her. I'm not promising advice, but I'm asking leading questions, and then you'll have a solution. How? What am I thinking about? Asked Lisa, surprised. What will people say that I jumped from divorce to marriage and back again? All the neighbors in that yard remember me and Georgie getting divorced. Everybody knew us. And here in your neighborhood, everyone knows I have a common-law husband, David. They'll start everywhere. Kostya will clean for me. Do you know what the neighbors are like? Just give them a reason. They'll make a big deal out of it and embellish it, and inappropriately insert their own words. And how can I explain this situation to my son? Oh well, you made a big deal out of it. Christopher replied with a smile. I see you asked me for rhetorical advice. I think I have decided everything for myself. You want to go back to Georgie. Only gossip scares you. Oh, you got me right where you want me. I already know I want to go back to Kevin's father. I just want my son to have a daddy. Lisa answered without hesitation. That's just a lot of gossip. Look at this. First of all, the neighbors don't know anything about David. And if you go back to Georgie, those who have been in that house for 5 days and forget, they will find a new sensation. So do what your heart tells you to do, and be happy. Never look back on other people's opinions from now on, summed up my ex-husband Christopher. Well, if Wright once troubled you such thoughts, then move to another part of the city. It's big, someplace where no one knows you at all. Sell this apartment and buy a new one. That's the earthly solution. Wow, Christopher. There's a reason I share that with you. Here's the truth, the solution that suits everyone right now. Georgie would do anything to keep me with him, and let them first organize his task of moving out of the old district so that I can walk in peace and not hide my eyes from anyone. I'd like to give you some advice, though. Christopher took the girl's hand in his. About your relationship with Georgie. Don't be in a hurry to marry him again. Live civilly. Then he won't be sure that you've been ratted out by the boss, and at least he'll try to prove himself as a good husband. It's a sensible idea, Lisa said quite seriously. After listening to this long conversation, I got up and walked over to them. I'm sorry, Christopher, but I was sitting quietly behind you and eavesdropping unauthorized. Immediately I confessed. At the sight of me, a satisfied smile spread across my ex's face. And you, girl, fear nothing. Christopher and I will never get any further from this story. Right, Christopher? He nodded approvingly. There, my favorite wife, whom I once betrayed. And she got me out, and you might say, prolonged my life. Forgive me, please, I apologized. Lisa, it's none of my business. But Christopher is such a good man. Don't you want to go back to him? It's been so many years since that unpleasant affair. Maybe you're ready to forgive him. Yeah, I don't know. I sat there listening to his story, and I realized that I was truly loved. A long time ago, my friend Emily predicted that I would meet someone who would be faithful to me. Joke or not. But Christopher hasn't had a single woman in all these years. Every time we meet, he says he's waiting for me. Thank you, dear Lisa, for your attention to our affairs of the heart. We in turn wish you nothing but happiness and a strong family. Well, let's take a walk to the courthouse rather than talk about this and that. I invited my ex-husband. He replied with great pleasure. Then he got up from the bench and gave me his hand. I took it and felt how warm and strong it was. Together we moved along blazing autumn multicolored alleys, leaving behind a pleasant young girl who looked at us with undisguised admiration.